You're probably wondering why I began the segment with such a prudish verse from the Bible. Well, unbeknownst to the lack of metaphorical thinking, the emphasis is not a technical or medical categorization. Rather, the effects sexual promiscuity has on the condition of a person's heart. This is nearly an impossibility for any millennial today jerking off to 18-year-olds farting milk onto one another, but for the sake of shooting for the stars, to reach the moon. Celibacy before marriage, monogamy afterwards. This is the ideal template towards continuing against the endless commercialized moral decay and left-leaning attacks on traditional gender roles, pushed by the spineless proletariat idea of free love. The practical purpose of being alive, the closest thing to biological longevity we have beyond living in the heart and memories of those dear to us, is to have children. For your dramatists and homosexuals disinterested in adoption, I am sorry that this answer does not surge of deep Socratic insight for the sake of compartmentalizing your narration into a grander scheme. I've also thoroughly conveyed how the men going their own way movement is a justifiable response to the verbose tenets of feminist ideology, and personally believe that they are an ally towards keeping women in line. But I once again say, in respect to those men who have took the mantle for the greater good, that the true potential of our species will always be carried by the upcoming generation, your children. And you are the sculptors for the horizon, as they are our future. The experiential conservatism a parent feels when raising children is why our society is running at all in the first place. This is undeniably the deepest incentive to get up at 4:30 and work another 13-hour workday in your late 30s. While no one is saying you cannot live a fulfilled existence whilst taking into account the absurd financial sacrifice that is to be placed burden upon a man's life, the fundamental detriment pushing men away from marriage today lies in the disdain of female sexuality running rampant. Sorry, ladies, what the past 50 years has shown us is that you cannot have it both ways. By the very rules of logic, either you allow your man to be the captain of the ship and enjoy the fruits of his assiduous work ethic, or live the unlikely equal partnership towards feeling the heavy responsibility of fighting the world away from your beloved children. I would strongly suggest going with your biology, as there is a plethora of sperm and a scarcity of eggs. In many ways, women have more power than any man could fathom towards the abundance of resource or collective suicide. Without actively being in risk of termination, they have the sociological ability to determine the value of competitiveness, hence economic growth in a civilization. But the delayed sexual practice and monogamous rite of passage is what ultimately has brought us to this point of fight or flight. The practice of chastity until marriage is a dying phenomenon, particularly in the West. Having said that, it is what ultimately determines the quality of a woman. A woman with a deleterious background is a woman with less value. Once a woman has had over 5 sexual partners, she is statistically a bad candidate for a traditional marriage. The advent of Tinder, early female maturation, and feminazism are truly concerning signals, as we are living in truly dark times. So once again, the less sexual partners a woman has had, the more quality of a candidate for marriage she is. Obviously, this would imply she was imprinted with an adequate awareness towards pre-selection of credible men who have the potentiality to live up to the standards their fathers had left them. There is also an abundance of critical secondary reasons behind this value judgment. The lowering likelihood of sexually transmitted diseases, opportunity of stability in one's marriage, avoidance of the parasitic identity of a single mother on welfare, diminishment of murdering the most innocent of us, higher levels of overall happiness, lowering the likelihood of child abuse, and the very imprinting of that child's worldview. This controlling of promiscuity imply a path of staying within the lines. In other words, a respect for authority and established rules. If you're lost in a forest and discover a trail only to be produced by 10,000 footsteps, it's probably your way out. The likelihood of raising a child with wonder of the universe, coupled with a paternalistic discipline, is then set forth by example. The child then will inevitably ponder on his or her transience, feeding the amygdala towards living one's life in embracement towards a capitalistic reality. As absurd as it sounds to the average Joe listening in, all of these highly beneficial factors are initiated by the partner's chastity to one another. Throughout religious history, this was conclusively understood, that the virgin state was spiritually superior to the sexual state by all accounts to the religious fathers. Now, while they took it a tad too far by punishing the woman for experiencing pleasure in the act of submission, we in turn have taken the corollary too far in the other direction. For once, let's call things as they are. Sexual intercourse is first and foremost about reproduction, and secondly about pleasure. And socio-cultural roles were primarily designed to raise healthy contributing members of society. A man will continue to roam the earth pondering about the spontaneity of existence and desire to have these questions satiated until the anchoring of biology is brought into the picture. Yes, pragmatically, it is all about your baby, but I'm talking about the effect it has on your psyche. The focal point it gives you is what it's all about. But what I want to focus my engagement on is exploring the peaking of sexuality. In other words, along with a much happier woman and disability of trust, the sexual restraint, in other words the function of religion, actually takes sex to another level. That is, the highest form of sexual intercourse from the perspective of gutsy, lip-licking, titillating pleasure. Because there is no way of making a hedge grow but by pruning it. And there is no way of increasing the fascination of sex but by repressing it. As men, we all have this feeling, whether we admit it or not, an almost gnawing feeling, understanding that the flower of femininity is optimally manifested by a beautifully ample and youthful appearing woman who, to put it bluntly, has not been ruined. It's been commonly refuted that the traditions and religious customs to put off sex are merely counter-reproductive strategies by rather envious beta males. But this is only a fraction of the reasoning behind this important pillar. The reason every holy saint, high Hindu priest, and Buddhist monk is expected to remain celibate is out of the preservation of remaining psychologically rooted on the subject of reproduction through sociological lens. Their whole body then acutely develops a psychosexual relationship with the physicality of the universe itself. This sensitivity to enticement is what makes the entire matter interesting in the first place, which is why the greatest source of erectile dysfunction today is hypersexuality, ergo, excessive masturbation. According to a myriad of religious scholars, this makes Christianity the most hedonistically, sexually fulfilling religion beyond any goddess-worshipping rituals held by the ancient fertility cults, tantric yoga, or even Kama Sutra. Even today, where abstinence before marriage has come down from 11% to less than 2%, Christianity continues to fight for the premise that intercourse before marriage is taboo. And even today, the sexual custom that rotates around the prioritization of child-rearing and romantic monogamy is the incomparable peak of real intimacy. The sexual restraint pushed by the rite is a method of making copulation exciting in a sort of dirty, kinky way. What the lackadaisical liberals do not seem to understand with their stringently ugly and stubborn notion of sexual liberation. And with the advent of instant accessibility to overstimulation within a couple seconds, and the fast food style dating scene, where children are mating younger and younger, the line between attraction versus an undeveloped brain accustomed to instant gratification has become blurred. They say hunger is the best spice. And this goes for all pleasures indubitably. Hunger, in this case restraint, is the spice that needs to be returned for the sake of our longevity as a society and for the benefits inculcated when constructing a family hive mind. By no means is this work an advocation towards Puritanism. We just need to recognize that there is a happy medium that very few have experienced, that the secret unconscious repression of sexuality is what makes it intriguing or even lustful in the first place. By sleeping with 3 different men within a week, you've lowered your marketing value and dried out the innate enticement between a potential candidate, like a fruit squeezer, leaving only the outer shell to biodegradably dry in the sun. And this is bad for men, but even worse for women. When a man reaches the age of wanting to settle down, that is, if he has the competitive credibility to do so, he will have to face the reality and acknowledge the information mentioned, and recognize that the definition of what makes a woman truly unbecoming is the amount of previous sexual partners she has had. I know a lot of women in their 40s, either wondering in clear desperation why men do not yearn to put them into their beds anymore, or better yet, are experiencing the devastating and bittering tug-of-war of divorce. This has become the norm. Let's not pretend. Men age like wine and women age like milk. And nobody wants to drink a glass that has had 20 dicks dipped inside. Intimacy is the act of exposing your true self to a stranger. So do not be a cuck and try to turn a hoe into a housewife. Unfortunately, she must reap what she sows and be made an example of. So, we now come full circle. This comes down to the fathers. Wrapping this segment up, you must be the man you'd want your daughter to date, because at the end of the day, this is men's fault, as we cannot seriously expect women to responsibly manage over high complex systems without compromising their evolutionary programmed moral compass. So boys, you must choose your partner like your future child has the deciding vote. The likelihood of your offspring being not just unfaithful, but giving up with ease towards commitment is grown exponentially to the degree of your past sexual promiscuity. The entire struggle between a lasting marriage can be summarized as the attempt to discontinue the negative decision-making one witnessed in their own parents. That is, stopping the passing of negative karmic energy from our guardians. Keep a clean slate, quality over quantity. Develop some standards and build from the ground up.